Welcome to the Sales Influence Podcast, where we talk about finding the why in how people buy. I'm your host, Victor Antonio. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for lending me those ears. And if you're watching this on video, I appreciate your eyeballs. So I got this question. It was an interesting question. It says, Victor, if you had to do a 5-minute investor pitch, right? 5-minute investor pitch. How would you approach it? How would you do it, right? Great question. Now, 5 minutes, kind of tight, but let's say it's a 5 to 10 minute investor pitch, almost like an extended elevator pitch. In other words, it's a very tall building, so you got time to ride up the elevator. But let's say, joking aside, that you have to do a 5 to 10 minute investor pitch. How would you do it? Here's what I would suggest. Years ago, a gentleman by the name of Neil Rackham came out with a book called Spin Selling. Still one of my favorite books. Even though it was written like in the late 80s, it's still a great model. It's one of those things that's just timeless. And SPIN stands for situation, problem, implication, the need payoff, right? So situation, what's the situation? This means there's a problem. What are the implications of that problem? And what is the need, what you need to do, and what's the payoff going to be? Spin, right? So now let's go back to this question about investor pitches or short pitches, right? And you can use this, by the way, when you're doing demos or just doing quick pitches over the phone. Keep the spin model in mind. I'm telling you, I don't care how much it's dated, it works. It's very powerful for organizing your thoughts. So for example, let's say you're selling a software package, right? And you're trying to get investors to actually invest in your software, right? So the first question is, why should we invest in you? That's what they're going to ask you. That's the big question. Why should we invest in you? How sure are you you're going to get the money back? And how soon will we get our money back? In other words, how much do you want? How sure are you can pull this off? And how fast will I get my money back? That's what investors want to know. That's it in a nutshell. So what if you structure your presentation using the spin model to actually answer those questions? For example, first of all, you explain the situation, what's happening in the market, right? The different changes that are happening in the market. And then you move to the problem. And the problem is the problem companies are having, and that's the problem that you're going to solve. That's what your software solves. So here's the situation, almost like a 30,000 foot view of what's happening in the market. You zoom in on the problem. This is the problem that they're having, right? And because they're having this problem, there's certain implications. That's the I. Because they're having these problems, these companies are struggling with this problem. The implications are, for example, they're losing revenue. Their costs are out of control. They're losing market share. And then the need payoff. That's why they need our software that we're developing. And if they implement our software because they need it, the payoff is they're going to increase their revenue. They're going to reduce their costs, expand their market share, right? Now, let's go through it slowly. The situation, high level, what's happening in the market. This is what you're going to explain to the investor. Here's what's happening in the market. And there's always within that an event, right? For example, if you think of COVID was an event. We have a situation, here's what was happening, and then COVID hits, and now we really have a problem because now people have to work remotely. That's the problem. And because they have to work remotely, it's causing A problem, B problem, C problem. The implication, the I, is that they're losing revenue, their costs are out of control, they're losing market share, customers are not happy, customer satisfaction scores are down, right? Net promoter scores are low, so forth and so on. Now, what they need, the N, they need to do is use our software, and the implications are if they do that, they'll be able to solve problem A, B, C, D, and E, right? Now, what you've done there is presented a great story, right? The situation, you highlighted the problem companies are having, the implications of not fixing that problem, and then the need payoff is using your product or service to fix that. Now, from there, you can answer the question on return on investment, break-even points, how fast, how soon are they going to get the money back? But you begin this by first framing what's happening in the market, what the problem is, what the implications are, because once the investors understand the problem you're trying to solve and how big that market is, and by the way, I didn't talk about something called the TAM, which is the total addressable market, which is how big is the opportunity for your software. Remember, what you're trying to do is not sell them the business plan right there and then. What you're trying to do is hook them in by telling them, look, Here's a situation in the market. Here's a problem it's causing. The implications are horrendous. Companies are going to struggle. Here's where the need comes in, and this is where they're going to buy our software. And again, to me, that's like a giant hook, right? Just hook them into the conversation before you actually get into financials, because too often we want to talk about numbers too quickly. But first, if we can control the conversation, frame it by letting them know, here's what's happening in the market. Here's the situation. Here are the problems companies are now having. The implications are dire. In other words, revenue down, cost up, market share shrinking, customer satisfaction score, so forth and so on, as I've already stated, right? And then you really talk about the need for your product. And then if you've done it correctly, if you spin them correctly, then the following question is, okay, show us your software and then show us how it's going to make us money in the long run. In other words, investors are going to say, if I give you $1 million, tell me, how sure are you that you're going to actually make that money back, and how fast or how soon will I see my return on investment? That's it. So consider using the spin model to frame a conversation, to frame a story for your investors, and let me know if that works for you or how it works for you, because it's a very powerful strategy. I still recommend Neil Rackham's book called Spin Selling. I think it's worth reading. So if you have the time, if you have the brain power, go check it out. On that note, check out the Sales Influence Podcast. Again, I thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And also, we got some new courses on the Sales Velocity Academy. We just added one about managing difficult people. We have another one on speed to value, how to onboard people. And again, every month we're trying to add a new course. Next month, we're doing something called the perfect voicemail, how to leave that voicemail, that perfect voicemail, so the prospect actually calls you back. So check out the Sales Velocity Academy at salesvelocityacademy.com. And on that note, this is Victor Antonio, always reminding you, selling ain't hard when you know how. Take care.